What's up everyone, Lance Hedrick here, and we are finally in the timeline where good coffee can be had for really cheap. I have been preaching about budget machines and grinders for many years. In fact, one of my first videos was going over budget 60mm flat burr grinders from AliExpress, and I'm always on the lookout for good quality budget grinders. A good grinder can be one of the biggest ways to revolutionize your coffee experience. Does that mean you need to go out and buy a new grinder right now? No. There are plenty of other ways without having to go shell out a ton of money on gear to improve your coffee. But there are a lot of you who are just now coming into coffee and want to find a grinder. There are a lot of you who may have a broken grinder and are on here looking for another grinder. Or there are those of you looking for some sort of portable grinder for trips that you go on or if you travel a lot for work. So today, I'm very excited to show you a few really cheap grinders that I am excited about with regard to their flavor profile in the cup. Now, I'm sure plenty of you recognize the name Kingrinder. It is a budget-style grinder, hand grinder, that's been online for plenty of years as far as being available for sale. And in fact, I had it in a review of mine some 3 years ago, the Kingrinder K6. Now, I have one of those right here, which we'll also brush on, but what I'm more excited about is their P Series that they launched within the last year or so. So right here, I've got the P0, the P1, and the P2. These are small, portable, little, lightweight hand grinders that can do a lot of cool things. And depending on where you're at in the world, they can range from anywhere between $35 US to 40, I think it's 44 pounds in the UK. So somewhere around that $30 to $60 range, depending on what sale might be going on. They're typically found on Amazon with different sales that can happen, whether you find it from a reseller or a distributor in your area that you can support, a local business or something along those lines. The prices are in that range, which is about, half of $100, around $50. Now, of course, I have a preference for one, but I wanted to go over these three options since this is what they have available. Hey, this is Lance from the future, and I'm going to ask that you take a moment, hit the like and the subscribe. There are still over 65% of you not subscribed, which I understand. You want to be a little voyeur. It's cute. It's actually a little weird, but hitting the subscribe helps the channel so much. If you enjoyed previous content of mine, or if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider doing it. If not, it's all good. All love. Just want to give a little reminder. Thank you so much. Let's continue on with the video. I'm going to put these two to the side, and we'll start with the P0. Now, first of all, it is a completely plastic construction. You don't need the silicone band. It comes with it for grip, which I find to be a really helpful tool to have in order to hold on tight to it, because this is all plastic. And so they're able to charge a lot lower price. But on the inside, they have a nice aluminum construction with stainless steel burrs and a stainless steel clicking mechanism. Then up here, we have the crank itself, which, as some of you probably know, there's a reason why it's a flat crank and not bent. We won't get into that. It's not terrible to have a flat crank, but of course could be ergonomically more sound if someone didn't kind of claim to own that design right. But that's where we're at in the world of coffee. So we have flat cranks here. On the bigger series like the K6 we'll look at in a bit, we have an external click system, which just means you twist the outside and you have a visual cue for where you're at. Under here, you're having to rely on counting clicks. So how many times it clicks back and forth. I'm going to show you what's under here though. So we're going to loosen this off. You just go coarser and coarser until this little wing nut kind of falls right off. So there this goes. Boop. Cute little aluminum wing nut. Then we have the plate where we're doing our grind setting on. So essentially on the bottom end of this wing nut, there is a little dimple that kind of clicks into place in these different divots. Clicking away. And then we pull out the burr. So it's this that is causing the difference. And of course we have a little washer and a spring for the grind adjustment. But on this one, the P0, you see that it's a pentagonal design. So what does that mean? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spokes right there. This kind of controls the feed rate of the beans into the crushing portions of the burrs themselves. Give you a better visual, here is a cone burr, here's the cone, and this is the outer ring of said cone burr. This is the obsidian burr set from the Lagom Mini. So as you can see, it's the same burr size that is coming in these tiny grinders. So this is quite a big burr actually for such a small housing. But anyway, to give you an idea of how this burr geometry works, and I should say as a quick aside, if you think you know something about burr geometry, you likely know nothing. No one really knows anything about it. It's all based off of educated guesses. But anyway, we take this cone burr, we put it inside the outer ring. So as you can see, the turning of it will grab a bean and crack it between the outer burr and the inner burr. And then this outer burr gets more narrow as it goes down to where it will meet much more closely to the crushing teeth of the cone. So when the beans continue to be fed down, they get smaller and smaller and pulverized. We see here we have a heptagonal burr because there are 7 spokes. If we were to switch it with a pentagonal, you see how much more space is between the center and the outside. It will be a much faster feeding rate of beans into that. It's believed that the faster the beans are fed into the burr itself, the more fines will be produced due to a more aggressive initial break. And so that is something that tends to be seen through multiple correlations, but even beyond that, this tends to be more for a dark roast coffee because with softer beans, darker roasted coffees are softer than lighter roasted counterparts. Having a faster feed rate is okay because they break a lot more easily. If you were to put really dense light roast beans in here, it'd be really difficult to crank. So one easy thing that you can say pretty objectively is that the less pre-breakers, the less good they are at light roast, if anything, because it's much harder to grind with. So we'll put this over to the side and we'll pull out the P1. Cheap. We'll take a look at this burr. And here we have it. So here we have a hexagonal burr. Now these have really aggressive steps to the inside. Normally on hexagonal burrs, you'll see it's a bit more blunted here. This one has a much more aggressive feed rate than other hexagonal burrs that you might see. In fact, we'll take a look at one in the K2 that's over here and compare them. But anyway, this one has a bit more aggressive braking structure than something like the Kinu, for instance, which also has a hexagonal burr on the inside. So this one is an aggressive feed rate style burr that's also going to kind of shine with producing more fines. It's going to be a bit faster for your darker roasted coffees, but it'll be slower than something like the pentagonal. And again, just to give you a visual, we'll put this inside here so you can kind of see the spacing. And we switch it with this. There's much less space in between because more spokes are filling up those edges. Then finally, we have what I think is the darling of the trio, the P2. Again, plastic cup, so there's nothing different there. Same plastic build. And this one I literally just used, so there's coffee still in it. It's not clean like the other two. So here we have this burr. Now what you'll notice with this is it's almost identical to that obsidian burr that was in the Lagome Mini. This is a very common burr geometry that's been around for a while. Now there are debates as to who created this geometry initially. My belief from what I have heard from contacts I have in Italy is that Keber himself is the one who created this burr geometry for another company. But as you can see, it is same diameter. The one from the Lagome is a bit taller, which just means it has a bit more burr path. But even still, in such a small grinder, that is a fantastically big burr in order to create your coffee. So this one is heptagonal. And again, when we put it inside the cone, or the collar, you can see there's a lot less distance between the fins and the outside, meaning a slower feed rate, and it produces less fines and is more suitable for pour over and for light roast type of extractions. So on the inside, we have the aluminum housing and we have a double bearing setup in order to help with the alignment of the rod itself. So that's what we have going on inside. First, we're going to take a look at the famed Comandante grinder. So this grinder runs at about $300 or something. It's got internal clicks, which again, I'm not a big fan of, especially when you're over the $100 price point. I believe they should all be a fixed burrs with external clicking systems. This has a floating burr system just like these do, which means it's just kind of being held on at the bottom with tension between a spring and the bottom plate. And now that we open it, we see that they have their nitro blade. Now on theirs, it's a bit different. They don't have a bottom plate for the dialing. It's just engraved onto the burr itself. But even still, as we can see here, the burr geometry is almost identical. In fact, The only real difference I can tell is that the fins on the Comandante up top are a bit thicker, so maybe it'll have a little slower feed rate, but that seems pretty small, though small things in burrs can actually be big things. But even still, and then the pre-breakers don't go down as low. It has a bit bigger crushing area, just slightly, than the one from the P2. And as you can see, it's similar to the one on the Lagome. So that's what we have in the Comandante. Another similar one is one of my favorite budget grinders ever. Sadly, they don't make them anymore, but this is the Q2 heptagonal. Some of you out there have this, so we'll take this one out just so you can kind of see. But what I've been learning is the Kingrinder seems to essentially just be a more budget-friendly Easy Presso lineup. The Easy Presso has, $200, $300 grinders that are incredibly well built, and their budget series are like $90. The Kingrinders have like $100, $120 grinders that are their luxury series, and then $50 budget grinders. But even still, let's go ahead and pull this out. So much in the same way as the others, it has kind of the floating burr, which just means it's not affixed to the axle, and you kind of have, a guess in the dark as to alignment, which is, to me, fine under $100. Above that, I think it's a bit, crazy. But anyway, here's the burr there in the Q2. This one's just a little bit shorter, not much, and then everything else is roughly identical. So a little bit longer burr path on the Q2 heptagonal, but for the most part, the geometries are almost identical. Heptagonal burrs, and there you go. So the P2 and the Q2, very similar. And as has been shown before, the Comandante and the Q2 are very similar, Q2 being a taller burr as well. There you go against the Lagome, almost identical in every way. Now, my preference between the Comandante and the Q2, I've said before, is the Q2. I think some of it may be burr path being a bit longer, or it could just be placebo. I'm not sure, but it's been in blind tastings. It's not been the most conclusive thing ever, but I have found there has been a preference there. But anyway, that's what we have with the Q2. And then finally, with the heptagonal burrs, I thought I'd pull out a K Series. Lots of people are using K Series, really like the K Series, so I thought it'd be nice to have this as something to compare as well. Now, this one is a more expensive one. I mean, it's not quite as much as the Comandante, but it is in that upper echelon of pricing, around $280 maybe, but it does have the burr affixed to the axle. That is aligned in-house and is something I recommend not removing, so you don't have to mess around with the alignment of that. But as you can see here, it is slightly bigger. As you can see there, it's a few millimeters bigger here. Same against the Comandante. So the K is quite a bit bigger than the Comandante, as well as the P2 and the Q2, etc. But again, the geometry is very similar. It's just kind of like you clicked the corner and enlarged it for the K Series. So very nice burr in here. I really love the K Series. I think they do a wonderful job, and it's a faster grinder because the burr is bigger. There's more surface area for the beans to be exposed to. But anyway, that's what's in the K Series itself. So, as you can see, a lot of these heptagonal burrs are very similar. So it pleases me to see a quality burr geometry inside the P2 is going to give you something, of quality. Now, as far as the other two go, I don't have very many grinders that feature these types of burr sets, but I'll go ahead and show you what's inside of the Flare grinder as well as the J Max, so that we can get an idea of what these more espresso-focused grinders kind of look like. Now on the Flare, we have a hexagonal burr that's very, very, very similar to that which you would find on Baratza Encore, on the Baratza Sette. Pretty similar to that, maybe a little bit more intense grooves in the center, but they could be more similar than memory is serving. Now the similar hexagonal here is like this. Now, this one reminds me of the burr that was inside of the Lagome hand grinder that used to be under another name that I'm blanking on right now. Can't recall. But anyway, I've seen this burr set in a few different hand grinders in my time, though I believe I've given them all away through Patreon competitions. But anyway, it's obviously very dissimilar burrs here. I would say that the idea behind the one in the P1 is more so for filter coffee, though it's really difficult to say because the ZP6 burr looks very similar to this as well. A hexagonal burr that is not very in depth with their cuts. So this is optimized for kind of traditional espresso, but as I said, little changes can make huge differences, and the ZP6 can't even do espresso. This has a similar geometry to that, to the Sette, to the Etzinger style burrs. But yeah, so it is quite different to the hexagonal here. Not all hexagonals are built the same. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to show that. And then finally, we'll take a look at the J Max. Now again, we have a burr affixed to an axle, which again, I love. This one is much more similar. It's a hexagonal burr. The edges are nowhere near as fine as the ones on the Kingrinder. There will be a more aggressive feed on the Kingrinder than on the Easy Presso. The Easy Presso burr is also slightly larger, but it's a similar kind of idea with the design. This one excels at espresso. This one, it's difficult to really say what their intention with it is. I don't think necessarily their intention was for a daily espresso grinder with the construction of these, but it would make sense that this would be an aggressive feed rate, higher fines production, likely for espresso, but I don't know if their intention was for, consistent espresso usage or if it was just for a darker roasted pour over. But in any event, it's similar to the Ital mill style burr that we can see here and that we see in the Kinu hand grinder. It's just much more aggressive feed rate due to the thinner pre-break essentially. So there's more space there for beans to get through, more intense fracture rate, faster bean feed, just slightly. But in any event, something that does make espresso quite well if you're willing to grind with it, and somewhat similar to these burrs that we're seeing in the J. For my own taste preferences, this one, the pentagonal, the P0, is best for things like a dark roast espresso, or if you're just wanting some filter coffee and it's easy to grind, you're using darker roasted coffees. That way it's good to go. There are apparently some people who have found they do enjoy this for lighter roasted pour overs. I cannot say the same for myself. I find that it mutes a lot of the acidity and just it blends up the coffees, takes away any type of nuance it might have. So I'm not a big fan of the P0 for anything but maybe darker roasted espresso or darker roasted brews. The middle one, the P1, I think is a bit of it's a bit odd because it's not an optimized burr design in my opinion for anything. I think it does darker roasted espresso fine. I think it does darker roasted pour overs fine. I think that if I were to choose between these for darker roasted coffees, I'd probably just go with the pentagonal because it's a bit faster. It seems to be a little bit better when it comes to brews. This one just kind of gives me harsh brews regardless, but I'm sure there are people out there who will love it. It's not wrong to enjoy something I dislike. Weird I feel the need to say that, but I do on occasion. Then my favorite personally is the P2. I think that this rivals a lot of the more expensive heptagonal burr sets. Yes, there are build quality issues, which we'll go over here in a second, but in the end, I do think it does a pretty solid job. These are not meant to be daily drivers, okay? If you're someone that brews espresso daily or even multiple pour overs a day, this is not going to cut it for you. You may say, well, why not? They taste great. I don't care if it's a plastic body. Great. I don't mind the plastic body either. My issue is this right here. Now, inside the grinder itself, what you normally would see, well, not normally, but on nicer grinders, you either have the burr affixed to the axle itself with keys. All the torque from the grinding is going to be transferred to the burr itself. So as it's turning, it's going straight to the burr, okay? Now on the Comandante, it is transferred directly to the burr because the burr is affixed directly to the click system. So there's no plate in between. It's affixed directly to it. So the threads holding this on are what are helping to transfer the torque to the burr itself. Now on the Q2, you have the burr is actually kind of floating on that axle, but it is affixed based off of this dial plate. This dialing plate is 4 millimeters thick. The one inside the P2 is 2, half the size. Because this is so thin and just weak, whenever it gets difficult to grind inside this grinder, the torque actually will begin to transfer to the plate itself. And if you look really closely here, you'll see dents that are beginning to form on the inside of my plate. I've seen some other pictures of other people having a similar experience when they're using it too aggressively for too long. That being said, once I started seeing the dents, they haven't really progressed, so I don't know if it's going to be a massive issue in the short term, but this is something that I would be on the lookout for if you're looking to use this grinder as a daily, especially if you're doing light roast, and especially if it's light roast espresso. Since this is clicking on here, there are times where that little divot causes a little disconnection between the wing nut and the dialing plate itself, meaning you have a little give. This means that you might not have like the granularity or the precision of every single little click. It might skip a click. You may be within one click of where you want to be if this starts to happen to your grinder. Now, I grind very, very, very dense coffees, and I've been doing pretty fine grinds on this to make soup. Hopefully they'll sell replacements. I've got to imagine maybe they will, or even if they could just sell a 3mm or a 4mm one that could maybe fit on the grinder, that would be fantastic as well. But in any event, that's something I felt obligated to say. Oh, I've got a Niche Zero. I've got a Eureka Specialita. They don't do very good on pour-overs. This could be a great thing if you're not majority pour-over. If it's just kind of a use every now and then, great. If it's a travel grinder, great. I love to travel with mine because it's so light, because it's a plastic construction, and it produces absolutely stellar coffees. These are more the budget grinders you're wanting if you want a daily. These are built to be for daily espresso. It starts with a K2 from Kingrinder. I wouldn't recommend the lower numbers than that if you're doing daily espresso. The K2 is a fantastically capable grinder. So we open this up. It's built with an aluminum body, built really well. It does have internal clicks, which is not my ideal, but we can take a look at the Burr set here. Again, we have that plate on the bottom, but like the Q2 and like other grinders that rely on the dialing plate, this one is much thicker. So it's able to maintain its shape for much longer without any type of fear. So we can go ahead and take a look. This one seems to be 3mm. Yep, it's 3mm. So still not as thick, shockingly, as the Q2 heptagonal, which sadly isn't made anymore. They switched to the Q Air, which I've not tried, but I hear is not as well built. But this one, boom, we have quite a nice big burr here. This is another hexagonal burr, similar to the one we have in the P2, but as you can see, it has a much slower feed rate in, and they're much more diagonal, these cuts are. These are almost straight up and down perpendicular, whereas these have very, intense cuts, which will allow the surface area to be longer for the beans to cut along it. They have a longer burr path, which gives you overall better coffee. For the most part, that's a correlation, of course, that I'm making subjectively, but regardless. And we have another 32mm burr here, so a bit bigger than the smaller ones, which means faster grinding as well. But this does a fantastic job for your daily espresso. It can rival something like the J Max. I still prefer the J Max for the build quality. I think it's slightly better. I find the external clicks to be much more helpful. Speaking of external clicks, the J Max has 8 microns per click, whereas the P Series are 33. So almost identical to the Comandante. Well, actually, this is 33 microns burr movement as opposed to burr gap on the Comandante. So this is actually even more precise than the Comandante 30 per gap because they do it by gap movement. This is burr movement. Anyway, so this one is more precise. I believe it's 16 microns burr movement per click. But anyway, the K2 I think's incredible. It should be around $80 maybe, 80 or 90. It changes all the time. That's why I'm not giving you precise numbers. People get annoyed sometimes with these machines. They switch their pricing so often. Amazon runs sales sometimes. It's hard to have them, be a timeless video with the pricing. This is the K6. This, like its brother here, aluminum build with a nice silicone body here that you can hold on to. It's a wrap, not a body. But anyway, it has a screw-on catch cup. We have the same type of thing, some nice branding on the bottom. It's a similar construction to the K2, but taken to another level. I think it's a bit higher quality build, and the burr is affixed to the axle, so we'll go ahead and take this out so you can take a look at that. And here we have the burr inside the K6. As you can see, it's a large burr. Yep, 32mm, just like the Easy Presso. Large burr affixed to an axle, which you only really see in the $200 and above segment. But this one, I normally see at $99. So that's really, really good for a burr affixed and for external click system. Fantastic. Then, of course, we have aluminum body in here. We have a triple bearing system inside, which enhances alignment even more. You can't say that about a lot of other grinders. So you have triple bearing inside to really align this axle. And then it's also screwed onto the axle itself, so it's a perfect torque transfer with the 3 bolts inside the bottom. It's the same geometry heptagonal as the P2, though it's just supersized, so faster grinding, a bit more even particle distribution, and wonderful time had by all. And now this one, again, is a much more robust build and is something that you can use daily for espresso or filter, much easier to grind with, and overall better time. Though it is double the price, that's one of those things where we're still at a point where 100 is about your entry barrier if you're wanting really good light roasted coffee daily. Otherwise, you go cheaper. It won't really be a nice daily grinder because you can have some of those issues as I showed with the bottom shear plate. But on this one, you're good to go. There's no worries at all about build quality. It is fantastic. All right, now for a quick grind test. So I've got some, I would say, medium light roasted coffees here. So what we're gonna do is grind at, you know, this one on the P0, we'll do close to espresso, just a bit more. Now this one I won't be using the silicone band, so you can kind of see what it's like to grind without a silicone band. Okay, so we've got 15 grams in here, and I'll show you what it's like to grind. 15 grams, just above espresso in that soup range. Ready? Go. All right, there we go. Pretty fine, not quite espresso, but right in that soup range. So that's roughly where we're at on that grind size. Now, as you can see, there is quite a bit down here that goes on, but that's typical. That's just static. Let's go ahead and what you would do at the end of grinding, just like with any other hand grinder, you would just tap it, make sure it's all in, tap it. And there you go. Now you can, of course, do a quick little wipe down after each session if you want to be extra clean. But with plastic, you're going to have static buildup. That's just, you're not going to get perfect workflow on an extreme budget grinder. So that's kind of what you're working with the P0. So let's put this back together. And as you can see with the medium dark or the medium light, it didn't really struggle that hard. I didn't really struggle that hard to grind it. It gets more difficult with the light roast, and I'll show a light roast example on the heptagonal because that's where I think most people would get light roasted coffees, not necessarily the P0. So we're doing a similar grind size on the P1. All right, and there we have it. Again, not very difficult. There were a couple more hitches with that, but as you can see, it's about the same grind size as the other. So there we have it. Just a quick little wipe down, and we're good to go. Then finally, we will do the heptagonal with the same beans at the same grind size, but then I'm gonna switch over to a light roast, like a really light roasted coffee, to kind of show you the difference there. Not with taste, but with the grinding process. All right, 15 grams yet again, and here we go. All right, so that ground a lot faster, which is actually shocking. There we have it. Again, same grind size. Boom, and we clean that off. And for my final trick, we'll be making soup with an ultra light roast of an Ethiopian Gesha village. So let's get the hand grinder. There it is, already set to the grind size. We'll do 22 grams. Now real quick, just so y'all know, you can fit 25 in there comfortably, 25 grams of a light roast. But we're doing 22 for this. And let's get souping. All right, 22 on the dot. Well, 22.2. I'll take one back. Give me that. 22 grams on the money. You can kind of see how this works. Let's get grinding. I'm going to do it perpendicular. I normally grind like this, but a lot of people still haven't come onto the slow feed train, so we're going to do it like this for a bit, and then I'll switch to the side. But this is the faster way technically to grind, but I prefer tilted for a slower feed into the burst. But let's go. Okay, now we go easier. All right. So when you tilt it, it's a slower trickle of the beans into the burr. Still a little difficult, but the more parallel you go, the easier it gets. But you have to redial your coffees when you do this because the grounds will be a bit coarser. But it's not great. The experience grinding this is not great, and I'm probably just destroying that little shear plate on the bottom. I would never, ever recommend this grinder for a light roast espresso. No chance. And there we have it. Now we're down to just the last couple of beans. There we go. Whoopsies. There we go. Give it some taps, it can get pretty clean. I don't know if you can really see that, you probably can't, but it's not that fine. So that's just to kind of show, it is difficult to grind with when you have ultralight coffee. Granted, this is as light of coffee as you can get. So if you're at home going, oh, I drink light roast, unless you're drinking a handful of roasters like Picky Chemist or Substance or Min-Max or, you know, things along those lines, you're not really drinking a coffee that's going to grind like this. That's not really a thing for most of these coffees, but I did want to show the absolute extreme. I like showing extremes because I can't show every use case here. Anyway, now you know we got to make soup. It's been my obsession. It's been my darling. It's been my lover. It's been my life. So let's make a quick soup. And again, if you're watching this and you have no idea what I mean by soup, it's not like that kid on the Theo Vaughn podcast, okay? This is a different thing altogether. We're going to add 85 grams of water to that 22 gram dose. There we go. We're going to pull this to the side. This is the #1 way to test for the efficacy of a grinder. And we push. Make sure it's all saturated. You ready? Let's soup. I need a tattoo that says let's soup. There it is. Our brew is done. Our brew the bubbles are the best part. Okay. Now we've souped. Cheers. That is black tea and mashed up stone fruit. The black tea in it is insane. I love soup. These are fantastic grinders when we're talking about taste and cup. Now, of course, people won't be happy with plastic construction. Well, up your budget, little silly peeps. This is what you're gonna get at this price point, and I'm surprised at the build construction on the inside, even at that price point. It does a solid job, rivaling a lot of other hand grinders. My main focus is always taste and cup, and the P2 specifically, I think is fabulous taste and cup. I think it's fantastic. I still slightly prefer my Q2 heptagonal, but again, they're not making them. Maybe like the ZP6, we can get them to resurrect the Q2 heptagonal. But then again, we have the Kingrinder at the same price point, so I guess it doesn't really matter unless you're just really wanting this teeny tiny cutesy little size that fits in an AeroPress. Okay, so now you may be asking, well, do these fit in an AeroPress? Let's get the one without the silicone band. No, they don't, sadly. I do recommend these grinders for travel or occasional use only. If you're getting it for a daily, save up and go for the K6 or the K2, depending on your preference of coffee and if internal clicks don't destroy your patience. But anyway, that's it for me today. I know it was a long video, but I wanted to be thorough. I wanted to get over it all. I wanted to show you everything to be as transparent as possible. That's what we do here. I bought all these grinders. They'll be going to people on my Patreon. I'm actually going to put them up today after I film. So thank you so much for watching. You all are incredible. That's all from today. That's it. That's the video. took longer than you thought, but it's okay. I hope more than anything in the world that you all brew something tasty today. And cheers.